to start us out, that was a nice introduction. Thank you, Kim. And we had a lot of fun yesterday, by the way. I was trying to figure out if I knew anybody here that we'd met yesterday, because we had a lot of fun looking at your up-and-coming technologies and what you guys have going on. But I do represent Balfour Beatty, but I'm also an advisory board member for Above Glass Ceilings. And so one of the things we want to point out is we see trends in our industry. These are eminent, right? They're coming on, and you guys are going to hear a little bit about our angle on this. And we want to talk a little about this global talent shortage, because we kind of have a solution for it, and that is, let's embrace the other gender a little bit, and that's part of Above Glass Ceilings, okay? So, in fact, I was just talking with one of our major national firms that works electrical. MC Dean is the 4th largest electrical firm in the nation, and they're in a sheer panic over the resource crunch that we see as being unprecedented globally, okay? And not just in the construction field, but definitely in the construction industry. You guys have all heard about the infrastructure projects that are eminent, because we've needed those for a long time. And KPMG did a great study. If anyone wants it, I can send it to you. But they did a phenomenal study about infrastructure and the trends that we're seeing. And it does deal a lot with the technology and how we're changing the discussion around how we're going to be managing that. But bottom line is, big tech companies like yourself, whether you're specifically focused on construction or not, have kind of figured out that if they don't solve the problem on being more inclusive and bringing in talent and advancing talent, that they're going to struggle staying relevant in the future years. In fact, your tech competitors that aren't necessarily construction related but do have construction software, like Google and Facebook and Intel and Microsoft. I've met with all of their chiefs of diversity and a lot of their senior VPs for human resources and some of the the technology people at White House forums and things like this. In a lot of different settings. And what I find is interesting and encouraging is they are spending a lot of money trying to crack this nut. They're spending a lot of money trying to figure out why is it we can't, invite more women and more diverse employees into our world and then keep them and advance them. And trust me, I was with Phelps for 20 years. I was an officer with Phelps. I was the only female at the time. They have 2 now. That was good. And I spent 10 years trying to, figure it out for our company, because we started seeing our clientele, and we'd go to presentations and be like, "What's wrong with you people? What is wrong? Where is the diverse talent?" Because we weren't mirroring our clients, right? And they found diversity and inclusion very important. And in the innovative worlds, it's super critical, because think about it. You can want to be really, really innovative. You really want it, but you only know what you've experienced and what you've been taught. That's all you know. So if you can't look through lenses that you don't have, right? So if you don't have inclusion, then how are you going to break through some of those barriers of trying to think outside the box and look at things from different angles? So it makes sense. There's lots of studies on this. Everybody knows this is kind of common sense to begin with. But how do you do it? How do you go about it? Well, I spent 10 years, like I said, trying to solve this with Phelps. And I have funny stories about Jerry Morganson when he was the CEO. He would, every time we'd get together with all of our women, he would sit down right next to me and go, "What is the problem? We got people in the pipeline now. We're not moving them up. I just don't get it." And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know either, because I don't know how to solve." We have a very inconvenient industry. I moved a lot. The hours are horrible. You're always in harsh conditions. And so then we kind of, fell back on maybe women just don't like that. But that's not true. I'm here to tell you it's not true. I have 3 kids. I've moved 17 times. I've done a lot of weird stuff. I was kind of a job chaser, so I have a lot of experience. But I know that one of the problems is that we look at things and we say, well, this is how it's always been done, and we expect everyone to do it that same way. And I can assure you that things can be done and the results can be as good or better done in a different way. And that's kind of what we have to start to embrace when it comes to being more inclusive and looking at our working environment. Times have changed, right? So, but anyway, so I do have a lot of great stories, and I'm willing to share those with you on more tactical and specific examples. But for now, I just want to send the message that we have some innovative ideas coming up here in our presentation about where our industry is headed and how that's going to relate back to solving this global talent shortage that we're going to be facing. and how we can be more inclusive, because that's going to be a big solution for the industry, okay? So moving ahead, one of my favorite topics. And I did talk to some of your techies yesterday about this, because this is one of my favorite discussion points. So everybody's heard of offsite manufacturing, right? And you've seen general contractors dabble with this, right? You know, I mean, we brought Balfour, we put all the bathroom pods in Parkland Hospital in modularly, right? We did all the head walls for the medical gas in the patient rooms, which is like, the tip of the iceberg when it comes to modularized construction. And Mortensen's been dabbling with it, and all of our competitors are doing it. The issue we have with offsite manufacturing right now is the software that we use to design and execute work doesn't necessarily drive the behaviors to think properly about this, okay? So I was looking at some of your technologies yesterday, and I was like, wow, some of this stuff that you guys have on the books could really be helpful here, right? From being able to communicate from the chaotic site and the controlled environment of where you're going to be doing things off-site. Another advantage is, a controlled environment, and I'm visiting more in San Francisco next week, but I've visited quite a few of these where these contractors, these mostly subcontractors or smaller urban contractors have built warehouses, and they're doing this right now, like phenomenal stuff, right? A controlled environment is kind of desirable. It's women like it better because you've got more regular hours. You're not out in the elements. It's better quality. It's better safety. It's when you bring things in modularized, it's better cadence for our schedules. It helps the job kind of circle around when things are going to be happening. It's kind of like short interval production schedules that we use when I did the Pentagon, we did a lot of that, and it was really great because everybody can get in line. They knew what to expect. And predictability is hugely important in our business because we all know that change is the only constant in construction, right? So I was looking at some of the technologies Trimble had, and I thought, one of the big issues we have is when we're trying to think about offsite manufacturing, the version control by the time it gets through to the manufacturing and then back to the site is always lagging, right? So by the time you get it there, sometimes it doesn't fit, or there's components missing, or some changes happen that has caused it to be a problem. And the subs that I know that are really embracing this have spent a lot of money trying to overcome this stuff. So I looked at some of your technologies and I thought, you guys could really help us here. You could help us get ahead of this curve. Like I said, this is a great way to solve resource issues. It pulls a lot of labor off the job site. It embraces, an environment where, more women are going to be willing to want to come and work in that as tradespeople. And in fact, they did a study up in New York where Barclays did 2 projects side by side. One was all modularized, one was not. And they were very concerned because New York is a very heavy union. And they said, the union people are not going to want to take pay cuts to work in this controlled environment. And they were dead wrong. The union was thrilled that, yes, we will take a $20 an hour pay cut because I don't have to drive 2 hours across town, deal with the snow and the elements, and lose half my day with the commute and so on and so forth. So it's not an issue for either gender. But like I said, everyone's been dabbling with it, but you haven't really seen it take off like it has like in China, for instance. And we all know we can do it better than China, right? So I really think this is a great way to focus, and I think it's the future. I think it's imminent. I think it's going to happen, and we just want to make sure that we're on the cutting edge of that, and it's going to solve a lot of problems for us. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Excited? Yes?
Well, when you do that, you have to change your scheduling mechanism, though, so that you make sure that back in the plant they have the latest models that they're building.
Yes. Now, see, that's what I'm talking about. It's the whole behavior around how you approach a job. And we're going to talk about some of the blending of the lines of deliveries, right, later on, and how it relates to this. But the whole behavior around, like, let's say when we get a big job now, we think, gee, what could we do off-site? That's what we think, right? Instead of thinking, what can't be done off-site? Because everything else needs to be done off-site, right? It's a switch in how you prepare the design and then get into overlap with the execution. And then, like I said, my big sticking point is the version control. It's being able to have it be correct when it hits the job site.
Well, the biggest pushback you always got from the superintendents was the BIM guys were 3 days behind them.
Oh, yes. And that's exactly what happened in MC Dean. They bring things to the job, they'd throw out half their conduit because there was a change order, and it was,
It's a target field.
Yeah.
And Excel didn't want to use it because BIM guys were 3 days behind them.
Yeah. So that's why I was pointing out, like when I see those kinds of issues, and I think that's a good comment. Trying to get more real time with that, and like I said, you guys have some ideas. They're not on the market yet, that I think would really help solve those problems, because this is definitely not going to go away. But yeah, so it's a problem that I think is solvable, and it's inevitably we have to go this way. Now think about the emerging markets. Like I've done symposiums with Gensler and a bunch of the big architects about, like, the emerging markets where you really don't have materials and resources, right? So they have to use modularized construction to build airports and stuff in these greenfield environments where they don't have traditional construction. So and it's successfully done, but it's not normalized. It hasn't been normalized, and it needs to be in order to solve a lot of problems. Yes, go ahead.
How do you handle city inspections and stuff like that?
Good point.
Regional-specific issues.
I mean, basically, in New York when they did this, they had the city inspectors come to the factory. In Parkland, when we did the hospitals, they had to, they came. The representatives for the owner came to the factory to see the units before they went out. And the quality control is quite a bit better, because you have to have it. The tolerances are very tight in order for it to be shipped and then installed in a modularized unit. And the componentry can go from something that's like an electrical room, and shipping that in, a bathroom, or full suites of patient rooms or classrooms or things like that.
I was on a hospital that did this, and it was really interesting. The subs that were on other projects were sneaking the generals in the mornings
To see?
what we were doing, because they were like, "This is so much better.
Yeah.
Can you guys set one of these factories up?"
Yeah.
And it was amazing when the subs were driving the construction.
Oh yeah. And
they love working.
It cuts down on the schedule tremendous. I mean, it's a good time saver. And like I said, there's a lot of the jobs I know about that are practicing this to a very large scale, but they're top secret jobs, so I can't tell you what they are. But they are very technical, and it's very possible to do this if you have the right mindset and the right behavior. So I just wanted to kind of present this as a way of focusing on that's a big trend in our future, and we're going to talk a little bit more, like I said, about delivery mechanisms and things that will feed back into this.
When you have very large project sites, and in your experience, what's been the main argument against this type of organization?
Well, the biggest argument is we don't go far enough left. So we haven't designed it around allowing for this to occur. And then to your point about schedule, one of my pet peeves, and I don't know if I probably will touch on it later as well, but one of my pet peeves is I have a great example about infrastructure for scheduling buildings, right? So typically, tell me if I'm wrong, superintendents, and I've been a superintendent, they like to schedule jobs by geography. First floor, this wing, that level, that kind of thing. So subcontractors come in and they get a look-ahead schedule, and it's got geography of where we want to work. It doesn't really focus on trade flow so much. It definitely doesn't always address the issues of the infrastructure that serves certain areas, right? So one of the reasons why I focus on MEP so much and why I was happy to talk with you all yesterday is, nowadays half the value of what we deliver is MEP. It used to be about 30%, now it's closer to 50%. It's just more expensive stuff, it's more technology, that's how it works. And it's a black box for a lot of the GCs, they know how many cubic yards of concrete, they know how many blocks they have to put up, they know how many square foot of drywall, they got all that, right? They can figure this out, they know the production rates that go with that. But then when you ask them, so how are we doing on, the 18 different systems that we have electrically? They go, the electrician keeps going up in the ceiling. I don't know why. I mean, it's really difficult. So then you have to get into man hours and how many man hours and this kind of thing, and it's a pain in the ass, And we haven't really embraced the fact that it's half of what we put in place, and we have to focus on that to get better and more efficient at scheduling. So that's a big topic that I'm very passionate about, and one of the examples I use is so at the Pentagon, we did that renovation. It was the plane hit after we got the contract, so it was very chaotic. A lot of things changed, and so I was running all the construction on that job. So I was bringing in schedulers, and we were trying to look at this. Well, in order to make up for some of the impacts, I had to study the manpower quite a bit. So the universal space, which was 75% of the area of this, huge office building, was about 25% of the labor represented. And 75% of the labor was back of house. And that's how typically it is. So like if you have a campus that you're going to go build or a big structure for a client, and they tell you like, look, we need this part early. We need the west wing has to come a year ahead of time because I've got other things I got to go do in that. We typically will say, okay, well, now we're going to start, the foundation and the structure there sooner, without sometimes understanding that the air handlers that service it and the power that services it and the systems and the wayfinding and the annunciator panels and all that kind of stuff are located elsewhere, right? So in order to support the turnover of this area, we have to know what the infrastructure looks like, and then we need to manage those subs better by understanding what their production rates are and what their status is. Offsite manufacturing does help a great deal if you can componentize some of these large mechanical systems. Because just think about it, at the Pentagon, if we had been able to manufacture a lot of the mechanical areas off-site, and we knew when they were going to arrive, it wouldn't have been asses and elbows in back of house when we were trying to accelerate, right? So unlike the universal space where you could just double and triple your crews, and it was wide open. So go ahead.
So what is the right level of detail for a model?
For the model?
Yeah, because the model you get from the design from an architect is not what you can use to build.
Well, and so this is exactly my point, though. So when we get into the other delivery methods, a lot of the design now is being handled by the contractors. That's my favorite delivery method, right? And so the designers have to be taught how to do what we need them to do in order to make this happen, right? And that's a mind shift change. That's a behavior change.
Some of it's a behavior and some of it's a technology.
Some of it is technology, which is why I'm talking to you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on because I can talk forever about this. So here's another: facilities maintenance, aftercare, cybersecurity, commissioning. These are other big things that I was talking with some of the women I was having dinner with last night. Again, this is something that we focus on as something our clients have been asking for many years, that we don't know of any single solution that solves this problem for us. So commissioning is can take months, right? Especially on mission critical or healthcare or launch pads, which are my favorite jobs. Just really, most every building has a huge amount of commissioning where we have to prove we complied. And then afterwards, we have to upload into a facilities maintenance database, which is what they want us to do, but we don't do successfully a lot, so they can hit the ground running. So when I look at all the software products and solutions, I see a lot of the front-end stuff, right? But I don't see this back-end stuff. And when I want to sell to my clients, I want to be able to say, I got this figured out. We have this amazing commissioning module that actually starts with the end in mind, and we start it in the beginning of the job. And this is where the MEP part comes in, right? Because we have this module, and we have our subcontractors who actually love this populate the module and help us manage their work through that software. We get better at managing them. They're happy to do it because we're actually paying attention, right? And it's not a black box anymore. And then when you get to the end, the compliance check is so much easier, right? And then when you upload into a facilities maintenance database, they're not spending a year trying to populate a database that they can then start doing maintenance, printing out work orders, and so on and so forth, which it takes on many of our jobs. They invest a year in trying to get up to speed after we've given them the keys. So owners have been asking for this for a long time. We haven't found the perfect solution to make that happen. And then added to that, now we all know cybersecurity is a big concern. And our physical devices that we put in buildings are great back doors for hackers to get into. So, control valves and thermostats and things like that, this is something that we have to start being able to monitor, whether it's, hyperactivity or whatever it is that allows an end user to know if something funky is going on, right? Especially with our, almost all of our clients, but there's so much secure data now that's something that we have to start thinking about. So that's another trend. So if you have any questions about that, we can probably go.
So some of these large clients are so large that they have different divisions that would actually handle that facility. So there'd be a construction group that would work with you on the construction, but then the facilities management people are not even anywhere in the conversation. So I'm just wondering what your approach is on trying to get everybody in the room so you can start talking about these.
Oh yeah, right when we're trying to set ourselves apart to do a presentation, that's when the conversation starts. And then, Smithsonian's a great example. They have tons of facilities, and when we started working with them, and I've done a lot of work with them, I'm like, you need to bring that group in. We need to talk about they use Maximo. So what does that look like? What can we do to make sure that our transition is going to be smooth at the end? And they're happy to do it. It's just about engaging that conversation. I mean, they kind of expect it, but they're very vague about what it really looks like. And then, our deliverables a little bit fuzzy. And then, so in the end, what does the owner remember? It's how we turned our project over, whether they could start, using their facility. And that's usually a kind of a sour grape in the end, right? Because it's difficult. And so I just, we know that's a key aspect for our business to get better at. We're good at sales. We need to get good at the turnover, because what's the best sales? Good performance, right? And that end experience, if you were an end user, you would feel the same way, right? Using your building is all, just get out of our way, general contractor. We need to get to work, and we want you out of our way, and we want to be able to use our facility. So,
do you find you become the mediator between those groups?
Yes.
That way, because you got the facilities people, they go, we want this, and then they're going, no, I want this time in budget, and they're going, no, but I need this.
Oh yeah. No, because there's been plenty of projects where we've actually taken over like on a turnkey where we actually manage the facility because they haven't trained their people. And again, I know what you're saying, because they'll be like, trying to dissect whether this valve on a screen looks that way or this way, right? And you're like, who cares? And they're like, well, they're very passionate about just what they do for a living, and that's what they want. So then you have to remind them, there's a bigger picture. We're trying to do this, and you need to move along. So it's a lot of facilitation, right?
Okay, so Nancy covered a lot of things from the operations standpoint, being as an operations person. I come more from the business side of things, and I've spent my career in change management, knowledge management, marketing, all of those types of components of within the AEC industry, but more kind of tied to the people aspect of how do you manage change, how do you train people, how do you transition people, how do you manage change within the organization. So one of the trends that we are seeing in the industry for especially the last 5 to 7 years, is a little bit of a change fatigue. And it's impacted by a lot of different things. And I'll name just a few of them, but in general, the AEC industry is risk averse. We are taught from the very beginning, from the day one that you show up for work, all the way to your retirement, how to eliminate risk from your job. So how to make something safer, how to eliminate risk to schedule, budget, less personnel to use, and all of that. So our mindset is all about how do you eliminate risk. Change is a risk. So we tend to be, as an industry, change averse as well, because we don't want to change, and we especially don't embrace change for the sake of change. So it has to be really validated and really a real and reasonable and proven change before the construction industry, specifically construction, says, all right, I guess we'll take this on. So it takes a long time to get people there in our industry. And if you look at construction in specific, outside of the last maybe 10 years, before the last 10 years, so 2007, back to 1960s, if you look at that 40 whatever some years, the construction industry hasn't really changed. The way that you build buildings is the same way that you've done it in the 1960s. When it comes to kind of, all right, we're going to put the foundations, then we're going to do this. We went from paper to iPad. All right, that's a little bit of a change. But in reality, in how you schedule a job, how you build it, how you put all the trades in, it hasn't changed majorly. So it's been an industry that's kind of really resisted change for a long time. And in the last 10, 15 years, they got a lot of change. And that change is coming even more and more. A lot of it is technology driven. Some of it is driven by the fact that our clients are changing. So the AEC industry clients are changing. And that's changing because of the technology. Because now clients are becoming more engaged earlier on. Because they can visualize what the facility is going to look like. They can do a virtual walkthrough of facility. They can tell you, no, I want that TV over here. Don't put the plugs over there. Whereas before, it was on a plan that, on a drawing somewhere, and most clients were like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. I have no idea what this is going to look like. It's very hard to visualize. But now with technology, we are able to show them kind of what they're going to get and how they're going to get it. And they're getting some other departments engaged, like facilities gets engaged earlier on. Users get engaged, especially if you're dealing with hospitals or medical facilities. They bring their user groups in way early now to kind of go, how is this going to work? Virtually kind of train and walk people through. So the role of the client is changing in the AEC industry. And construction becomes less of a black box that clients don't have a clue. They just go, I just want a building. In addition, the AEC companies themselves are changing. And what's happening in the industry is there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of consolidations going on. There's a lot of regional and smaller businesses where the owners, who happen to be baby boomers, are deciding to retire, move to Florida, do whatever they want to do. And that is changing the leadership of those companies. A lot of them are being sold to larger corporations. That is a complete shift in the culture, in the mindset, in kind of how that company operates. Some are getting new leadership, and it could be a diverse leadership. So that's a whole other aspect that our industry hasn't dealt with a lot in the past. And it's just changing kind of how companies operate, and their culture is shifting. And a lot of, when you look at kind of the employees of companies in our industry, they tend to be, you get kind of, you move up in the company based on the years of your experience, basically. That's kind of how our industry operates. It's very much based on gray hair. That's how it is. And what that causes is so that leadership tends to be more senior, tends to be more kind of older in age, which means they're experiencing the change fatigue a lot more than some of the younger generations may experience it. So if you're talking about technology changes, if you're talking about new software, new way of doing things, going off-site or doing any of that, the younger generations are more likely to embrace that because they grew up with change. They grew up with technology. They grew up kind of knowing that nothing's constant, whereas a lot of the leadership in companies hasn't. They haven't had to change for the 40 years or 30, that they've been in the industry. So that's kind of a trend that is happening there, and you need to be aware of it because it is going to impact how you work with those companies, because a lot of them, I can't tell you how many programs we've implemented and how many new technologies we've rolled out to the company, and the response we got from the people going, something new again, and it's not, it may be something that's absolutely helping their job, that's absolutely great, but you just caught them on the third change that week, and they're just done with it, and they don't want to learn another thing. They don't want to change another thing. And then the other kind of trend within the AEC companies changing deals with a lot of companies are looking to become national companies. So one of the things in construction is a local business. That's always been the case. That's always how we've been taught, from the beginning. It's all about the local relationships and the local stuff, and the local divisions have always had a lot of autonomy to do things on their own. Well, technology is changing that, and the fact that consolidation is happening within the industry is changing that companies want to leverage their skill set and leverage their employees through in different regions and be able to send the best people. They also want the clients to have a consistent experience with the company. So when you go and work with Kiewit in the west part of US, you're going to get the same experience as if you go and work with them somewhere in the East Coast. So it's driven by clients. It's also driven by the fact that companies are starting to realize a lot more that there is a lot that they can learn from each other, that they can leverage, and that they can eliminate some waste in that whole process. So that's kind of the change fatigue portion, if you can shift me. The other piece, and Nancy touched on that a little bit, but it deals with blending the lines between master planning, design, engineering, construction. So historically, the traditional project delivery methods have been, each person works in their little silo, and then they pass it on, and they go, all right, now it's your problem. I'm going to go on to the next thing, right? That's how it's been in this industry forever, and that's how it is still in some pieces. If you look at roadways, there's still a lot of the bid, build, kind of traditional type stuff. It's starting to change, and that means that companies need to change, and the technology needs to change. So what's happening with it, design build, integrated project delivery, alternative procurements, all of those types of deliveries are changing the way that we look at what we're doing from all the way from the start to the end. And technology needs to be able to facilitate and sometimes even drive that. So it is no longer okay to just listen to an engineer talk about how he wants his engineering tool to work. Because while it may work perfectly for the engineer, when that engineer needs to pass it off to the construction or to the MEP designer, it completely doesn't work for them. So then what do? Then that's when you introduce a lot of rework and all of that. And if you look at, in our industry, on an average project, there's a 40% waste in the process. And that's caused by rework, by redesign, by scheduled duplicate work, by the fact that things are not compatible, things are not talking to each other. So even though someone in the planning did all this work, well, it doesn't fit in this tool over here, so now we got to redo it. So I think the blending of all of those lines, the technology companies need to look at across all of it, what can be standardized as a platform, whether it's 50, 70%, whatever that percentage, that magic number is, and then what can be flexible on top of it to match the specific needs of whether it's MEP or designer or engineer or the construction company. And that's a challenge. It's a huge challenge because each one of those groups has a different goal, and it has a different kind of priority in mind. So, a contractor will tell you, well, we really care about the schedule, whereas the planner will tell you, I don't care about the schedule. You can take 50 years to build it. I really care about how you're going to lay it out on land and, where the view is going to look like. So it's just, everyone's got their different priorities, but how can we find some common ground and standardize enough so that that rework gets eliminated from the products, and that it gives people a leg up, whether it's in offsite manufacturing, because if you're working in the same tool, you can kind of incorporate elements of that from the very start and facilitate changing of the industry.
And having an appropriate amount of flexibility is what we call it. Because everybody wants flexibility. They all, even amongst our jobs, every job wants to do it differently. It's so annoying. But they do. Everyone's very strong-minded, and we call that chaos. That's just chaos. We can't then get analytics. We can't oversee things. We can't, the protocols go all over the place, and then it doesn't become useful to us as a historic model or anything like that. So we need that appropriate amount of flexibility where, like Ann said, 70% of it is very standard. Protocols are in place for every type of delivery, but then you've got some flexibility on top of that to match different needs for different clients and different solutions for delivering. So
So there's no magic bullet to these. It's just something that there are challenges that our industry is facing in general, and we're looking for help. We know we need help. We know we're struggling with change. We know we're struggling with kind of these alternative delivery methods and how to really respond to our clients' needs in a way that helps us win that next job.
And deliver it
Yeah,
successfully.
yeah, there you go.
So we're going to go to questions here. We're just saying it's time to go above. And, it's above best ceilings. So diversity equals excellence. Let's change the discussion. That's what we're talking about. So we just would like to take some questions or comments or things like that. Yeah, go ahead.
So just a comment, I would respectfully disagree with you a little bit, because what happens in this industry is we as Trimble or Autodesk or Bentley or anyone else try and sell from the bottom up. Right? We go out to the trailers and then we sell one project and they keep it secret from everyone else.
Yep.
So
So what part are you disagreeing with?
well, I just don't think we know how to sell it effectively. If you
Oh, I
go to,
got
if
you.
you go to I mean, Casey Bevins probably gets 15 calls a day on technologies that can differentiate. How does Casey get that out to?
Well,
To try and
yeah,
sell.
and again, the issue that we
Casey
have, the issue we have with that is Casey she's never ran a job.
Yeah, she's not operations.
So, yeah, so then you go to the field and then they keep everything secret. Yeah, I got you.
So I guess one question I would have for you guys is, if we have a game-changing technology,
Uh-huh.
what's the best way to get it out and get it in front of Parsons Brinkerhoff or Balfour Beatty or PCL or anyone else to say, this is a differentiator?
I have an idea. Okay. And actually, it's probably because of my experience here, having Kim bring me in and being able to spend time with you guys. My idea is to do this more often, where you bring in the ops decision makers to your facility and you share what you're doing, so they can then tell you, well, I love this. This is great. I have like a bunch of jobs I've done in the past that this could have solved some problems for me on, and I've got some ideas of how you can maybe apply this to the future.
Okay, so Nancy, now you got me rolling here. So if I want to set up an operations board of leaders like yourself, and I asked you to come in twice a year to Trimble, would you be willing to do it?
Absolutely, yeah.
So Oracle does it. Oracle grabs a bunch of CIOs, like I used to be in Casey and Guy Sakini and a bunch of other folks, and they say, we want Autodesk and Oracle to talk to each other. What do you guys think? And we look at each other and say, you got the wrong people in the room,
You do, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Now, the other thing I want you to comment on is, we talked about people and diversity, we talked about technology, we did not talk about process at all.
Oh, true.
Yeah, and to me, the biggest linchpin was that superintendent thinks they know the best way to do this, and they're not going to tell anyone else about it, and by the way, you're not going to get them to change. So, from an operations perspective, if you can say, this is the way we're going to do this.
Well, yeah, and coming from firsthand experience, that's happened many times in my career. So, but I have to tell you, like, it's sometimes it's a hard sell. Like on Parkland was a hard sell. We have one of our best superintendents in the company, Sam Moses, right? Just awesome guy. Did not want to do offsite manufacturing. Was against it. Didn't want to do pull planning. It was never done it. Don't have to do it. Don't want to do it. The subcontractors came forward and said, we're gonna do this. We want this, and we've collaborated, and so he got on board with it. And I'll tell you right now, he's the biggest salesperson for it. It was like the best experience he ever had. So sometimes there is a bit of a push, but I do think, again, at that leadership level, if you have the ops people who are decision makers, who have the pocketbook, who know what they need to do to be successful, and you invite them in, and they can, and it's an even exchange, right? It's like, you guys are telling us what you're doing, and we're like, okay, that gives me an idea. If I had had this, on these other jobs, I could have solved some problems that would have saved me a bunch of money, so I can see the value in this. But I would also want to, in the future, apply it in these other ways, right? And that's the only feedback that's going to be valuable, where it's actually going to be fruitful for you as a business in the end, is from the people who are going to use the tool, who have seen the movie more than once, right? I mean,
Well, and we were doing a TCF Bank Stadium, and we had one of the oldest curmudgeon superintendents you'd ever want to meet. A guy named Randy Schneider, is 55 years old, classic, right? What we took away from him was his risk. You're not going to pay for the BIM guys. You're not, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. and then you're gonna tell us at the end what you would do differently, okay? This guy will now not go to a job site without the BIM team
Yeah,
and everyone
yep,
else. So
right, exactly.
superintendents and PMs are cost conscious. They are about the budget and the
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah. But I
Well-
will tell you, in the construction industry especially, the decision makers is operations.
Yeah.
It is not IT. It is not. It is
Clearly.
operations.
I used to be a CIO. I'll tell you, it's not
Yeah,
IT. and it
it's
shouldn't
not.
be.
Yeah, absolutely. It
Right?
shouldn't.
It should not be.
Yeah.
You should be going in with a partner every time, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's BIM or scheduling or estimating or anything else, because I'm a service provider to them.
Exactly.
Right, no, you're hitting it right on, but I don't think we're disagreeing.
But the process piece, I want you to highlight the process piece, because to me, the highest margin jobs we had were when we followed a consistent process. It wasn't just about the technology of the people.
Yeah, so, but with the tech, so, I mean, when I came on to Balfour Beatty, I redid all their SOPs, so that's process, right? And there's still issues around protocol, because protocol is important, and so I hear what you're saying. And embedding that and onboarding that and training that is always a challenge for every company. But I'm a huge protocol person, right? When it comes to standardizing those types of things, so that when you're applying the technology, we get the best bang for our buck. And just for your own education, like when for the investment part, for the money spending, in my particular career, and I've done, I think I've tallied up $3.5 billion worth of work that I've been fully accountable for in my career. And the jobs get bigger and bigger, so that's probably not very impressive, but it's a lot of work. And I always use the mentality that, with my field staff, I would make them pay for it, because I wanted to see them get a return on that investment. So if I gave them free money and they got to toy around and experiment with something, they'd put half an effort into it, and kind of like this and then like that. It was, no gain, no loss, or whatever. But if I made them invest the money, then it was up to them to get a return on that investment. So I feel like, from an overhead standpoint, the only place we make money in this business is in the field. The rest of it is just fluff, right? So if you're going to spend money, spend it in the field, because that's where you're going to get a return. That's where you're going to be able to recover. That's where, and you got to get that mentality into those people. And I've been highly successful with that. And that was, kind of the Phelps mentality as well. So just as a food for thought.
And it's a little different, but in terms of the solutions that you've implemented in the past recent years, which are the ones that have been most impactful to the businesses that you've been involved with?
You mean technology solutions? Well, the most obvious one is BIM, right? Everybody, that's something that nobody denies is hugely valuable at this point. But I would also say, when it comes to scheduling, scheduling, which is a huge topic for us, the short interval planning and the pool planning and the collaborative effort, I think that's a huge advantage to our sites that people are embracing, greatly, because it's really kind of old-fashioned, honestly. I look at that and I think, these new terms, last plan, or it's like really sexy stuff. But honestly, it's trade flow. It's about trade flow, and it's about collaborating over trade flow. And so that's, to me, production is like the number one thing is in my book. So go ahead.
The one thing and it's not necessarily a specific tool, but a way to share knowledge. Because you're right, people, it lives in silos. So people will do something cool on a project, and then it will stay there. So one of the things that we've done is, how do you share that? How do you tell those stories from the one project that did some cool stuff onto the different projects? So that's how we got the word out throughout the company of, hey, this job did something innovative, and this is how they used SketchUp, for example, and this is something different, how they did it or what they did around it, and then share that with all of the people throughout the company. So it's more of the educating them by just doing the knowledge sharing, and having a good way to do that, having a good platform for sharing knowledge, for storing knowledge, for searching, for being able to kind of cross the boundaries in between the different projects, and then incentivizing sharing of the information. Because what we've learned, once we started sharing things, people wanted to share. Those job sites wanted to, open up and just talk about it. Now, they don't want to write up a whole case study about it and, you know, send it off to a bunch of people. But if you sit down with them and talk to them about, you know, what did you do on this job? They'll talk to you forever. They'll give you all kinds of details. And then someone has to kind of transform that and then share it throughout the company. And you can't penalize people if they did something that may not meet the SOP criteria or anything like that. It can't be a punishment, because then they'll stop sharing.
Go ahead.
So another trend I'm kind of seeing in the market, especially with these large projects that you talked about, is consortiums, especially with P3s. Is that you know, you develop and you can create an innovative process, but now you have 3 other partners, not subcontractors, but partners in a project.
We're doing one of those right now in Orlando for Disney.
I just see that more and more. And how do you guys work with them? Because I hear in some of these projects you have a lot of infighting that happens long into the project before things start to become fluid.
It is. There are challenges with it, because it's kind of like a version of multi-prime, which is everybody hates, right? Because, you know, everybody's teammates, but still you've got, and the hierarchy isn't as clear, right? So the accountability becomes a little fuzzy. And that's always a struggle, especially if you're working with Disney, you know, because they're imagining everything and you're supposed to engineer it. So, you know, yeah. So it's very challenging, and the way you address that in IPD, and Above Glass Ceilings also has some really cool IPDs coming up that are going to kick some ass, and we might, you know, tap into you guys for some of these ideas that also deal with other Fortune 500 firms. But the way you deal with that is it's managing expectations by being very, very clear in the contract structure about accountability and deliverables, like super duper clear. And I'm a real nerd when it comes to that. Like I'm not a vague person. I'm crystal clear about stuff. I know that things change. I'm good with that. But really being creative about how you do that and how that's going to make sure the behaviors are good amongst the team players is something that I've always excelled at. And because I'm a twin, right? And my sister is very creative. See, she does this kind of crap, right? It's really good. And I don't. I have a hard time dressing in the morning. Twins are opposites. But when it comes to creativity on forming deals and, you know, getting people to behave in contract environments, that's where I do a really good job. And that's the key to getting an IPD team to do what you want it to do.
In the same respect, you talked about consolidation of businesses and things like that, and even these consortiums are starting to get together, so they're competing, so their competition levels are different versus small, medium, large, and mega organizations that then hire down. Now there's other groups that are getting together to try and compete with some of these mega projects. And then when you get into those situations, do you create a consortium? But also Balfour is large. They're one of the megas, basically. Yeah. And when you go into a competitive position with a consortium, how do you?
It's all strategy. I mean, see, and honestly, it just depends on what you think is going to be the winner, right? So Balfour is pretty good at forming consortiums, where Phelps is not. Phelps hates joint venturing because they want all the money and they want all the risk. And Balfour likes to share that kind of stuff. So they're just different models, and they, you know, one's publicly traded and the other one's not, and they have different ways of, you know, thinking about what their business strategy is. But I you know, I think I love the different delivery methods that are coming forward. The Pentagon was an interesting one, because even though it was a straight design build, there was no estimate, right? Everybody had the same price. It was like, tell us what you can do for this much money. And that kind of thing creates a whole different environment when you're trying to go figure out how to solve problems, because you're trying to get into the owner's head. You're trying to do the challenger, which is, I know the owner, I know what they need, I can protect them from themselves, I understand their business, and that actually makes it way more interesting and fun for us, right? So, thank you. Pleasure.